Well, welcome to the second lesson of this course, and we're going to be talking today about reviewing the literature, which is going to be really important in understanding and gathering information about a particular topic. So there are reasons that someone would want to review the literature, and researchers typically start by identifying a broad problem area of interest to research. For example, a problem area can be of practical nature, such as footwear use during long distance running, or a theoretical nature, for example, the validity of self determination theory and explain participation in ultramarathons. So you start with a big, broad idea. And usually, with a review of literature, you start to identify areas or themes that have been done, or maybe potentially areas that have not been done. And that can maybe lead you down to an area or an idea that you may want to research further. So researchers examine the research literature related to the problem area in an effort to identify a testable research hypothesis or a specific research purpose or question. So again, while you're reading the research literature, ideas or themes have come up about what has been done, but then you start to identify areas that may not have already been done, and that may develop a research hypothesis or an area that you find of interest. So authors of published research often make specific suggestions for future research in the discussion section of the report. So generally speaking, at the end of a manuscript, an investigator will identify areas of further research that needs to be done. These are effective ways of starting to identify areas that need further research or that can continue to move the field forward. So look for areas further research when you're reading the literature at the end of the discussion. So let's take a look at an example of what a suggestions for future research might look in a manuscript. So here in the underlined portion, these are examples that of a further research that the investigator has identified. And these are good ways to, again, find areas of research that the investigator has suggested that would be the next step or would be needed in order to further the research forward in this particular area. So again, these are suggestions when you're looking through your review of literature for your project that you can identify as potential ideas that for your project. So looking for these future research ideas. It should be noted that when doing a review of literature, it does take some time in order to find the articles, in order to start to read through them. So make sure that you plan accordingly to give yourself enough time. So what happens when you have with the review of literature, after you've had a chance to gather some articles and read them and develop some themes? Well, researchers may decide to replicate a research study. Or there are two different types. There's a strict replication where researchers attempts to copy everything about the original study in order to verify the results. So for example, there might be a drug study that someone would want to do it exactly like the previous research was done in order to determine if that particular drug was effective. Or there might be a modified replication where the researchers copies aspects of the study, but possibly in a different population with an improved measure. So it could be, for example, looking at the effects of resistance training on one population when you read it in the review, but you decide to do it on a different population. But you're still using a similar exercise protocol, but you have now identified and determined if it would affect a different population, such as one study may have used males, another study may use females. Another idea is that research may develop a novel research idea after reviewing the literature. However, this is very rare for junior researchers, and it takes some time to develop a research theme. But again, here are some different types of the research in terms of replicating a research study. So there are some benefits of reviewing the literature in the fact that not if you're only doing research yourself, but also it will help individuals who may be working with clients. So it's important to identify and have a way or some experience in reviewing the literature, whether you're going to be conducting a study or if you're going to be working with clients in your particular field, understanding how to synthesize and go through various literature to develop some themes and to understand what's already been done. So Some of the benefits are you identify best practices for different professions. What has been done effectively in order for you to replicate that. Identify the purpose for research, the future research. So identifies again things that have already been done, but also opens up areas of new research that can help further the field. Helps research to identify measures or instruments that have been used successfully or not by other researchers. So again, as we talked about previously, identifying and using measures that have been used before in your own research and or working with clients if you're going to be using those instruments can be effective in understanding what has already been done, and then you can identify those and use those accordingly. Another aspect is that it helps researchers avoid dead ends. For example, a researcher learns that a research question has been thoroughly investigated, or a treatment protocol has proven unsuccessful in other studies. So it does you no good to replicate that study, or if you're a clinician, it helps you understand that that particular approach may not have been very effective. And also, a researcher will learn how to organize and write a research report in their discipline. Reading literature, reading these journal articles over and over again will help you see how things have been done previously, how things have been formatted, how they have been written. And so it'll be helpful in your research proposal in this course. So the question is how do you actually locate the research literature, these manuscripts, these articles, these journal articles? Well, electronic database are the most efficient way to locate these articles. And luckily for us, there are some free databases used to locate peer-reviewed research. There's PubMed, for example. There's ERIC, and there's also the Google Scholar. Typically in our field of health sciences, PubMed tends to be one that's most broad and most focused for our field. And in just a moment, we'll give you a tutorial on how to search through PubMed. But some considerations when you're doing a search is that searching these databases, that a broad search includes one or two keywords. For example, obesity, which often results in hundreds or even thousands of hits. The advantage of this is it gives you an idea of how big the problem is. The disadvantage is there's so many articles, it'd be unrealistic for anyone to read all of them. So a narrower search includes more keywords that would increase the specificity. So you might include obesity and diabetes, obesity, diabetes, exercise, or Native American, particular population, men or women, which will result in fewer and more relevant results. So the idea is as you continue to add keywords, it will start to refine the number of articles that are available. And results can be filtered by additional criteria. For example, year of publication, type of publication, if it includes humans or non-humans, rodents. And peer-reviewed research articles and reports from government organizations and reputable foundations are acceptable sources of information that can be used in research and often provide a good foundation especially for broad data about the problem. So now we're going to turn our attention to an example of how we go about using PubMed to make a search. So let's take a look on how to do a search using PubMed. So once you get to the website using the link in the PowerPoint, you'll come to the home page and you'll see that there's this navigation bar. And here, let's say we want to search obesity. And you decide to put obesity into the search proposal, and you'll notice that it comes up with quite a bit of articles to read. Well, obviously that would be unrealistic. So you can start to add a few more filters, such as obesity and exercise. So you do a search there and it starts to narrow it further. Let's say you want more information about maybe exercise and diabetes. So by clicking on there, you'll notice that it starts to reduce it even further. So as you're doing your research literature review, you can start to add filters and that starts to narrow the number of articles. Some other ideas is that you can click on various things where it says you might want to filter in the last 5 years, for example, or you may just want to do human studies, people who have only humans as opposed to animals. Other ways is let's say you want to do a full free or full text articles, you can click on that, and that starts to narrow it as well. So these are some examples as to what and how to narrow your research. And it'll be effective if you do the free full text, because that'll give you some availability in terms of what might be out there. And you can see that there through here it has free PMC article, et cetera, et cetera. So these are articles that would be available in their in totality for you to read. So let's say you start to look through the articles and you decide that this might be one that would be of interest to your research question, your proposal. So you would simply click on the article, and what will come up is going to be an abstract. And this gives, again, an idea for you to read through to see if this is something that you would want to read more about. If it is, what you want to do is you see up in the upper right-hand corner here it has a free full text. Again, since you filtered by full text, all these should be now free full text. And again, you'll see that it comes in on the internet, okay, or you have the option in looking in, you can look at a PDF. Now, some articles will have the advantages as you're reading. You can see the background and methods. And the idea is they actually have in the blue here, the articles that are the references found at the end. And so again, you'd want to look through the methodology, some of the results to determine if this is something that would help with your review of literature. Now, something I have found to be very effective is once you find the article, and you're perusing those articles on the PubMed, is to find an article that seems to be most relevant to what you are trying to research more about. And then you go to the back of that particular article to their bibliography, their reference page, and then you read those references. And you can use those references as a way to search again. You can simply then start to search for those particular articles, and that's a very effective way. And then you would repeat the process in those articles, looking at the references page as well. That's a very effective way of trying to narrow the articles that you would want to look for. So again, the easiest way to do this would be to cut and paste the articles, the reference into PubMed or Google Scholar, and then you may get a hit. In some cases, you might be lucky and they may have the full text article that you could download, or you may need to just use the abstract. Now, there are limitations with using just the abstract, is that you're not going to be able to find out the details of the methodology, and the results will not be in detail or further discussion. So it's best in your review of literature that you focus on articles if you can as much as possible, that you can get the full article. You can always use the interlibrary loan service as well. That's another means of using or finding articles that might be of use for you. So this is just an example of the research looking up articles on PubMed. Again, this is a very effective way to filter over here, and then you can continue to filter based on keywords that you want to do. So I would recommend, taking a moment now. You can pause the video, maybe going to PubMed and just taking an opportunity to practice, maybe put in a few keywords and just get familiar with using PubMed, because you'll need to start using this database or another database to obtain the articles for your project. All right, so this is again the overview. Now there's also, we're going to go back to the slides and to discuss a little bit about some other credible sources that you can use for, such as government organizations. So here are some credible sources that from government organizations: the CDC, cancer.gov, census.gov, NHLBI. These are great for national or some statistics. I've used these multiple times, and they're really effective at giving you some idea about what are the current statistics on a particular topic. So again, on your own time, look for on these websites, peruse through some of them to see if there's anything that would be of use in terms of getting some data collection as well. And there are some private foundations that conduct research and present their findings on the websites and publish reports, as you can see here. But the most effective ones I have found are using some of these government databases here. So let's see how you would write a literature review. So when you're writing a literature review, why you would want to do it is, if, let's say it's for your thesis or a dissertation, or you may want to synthesize the body of literature for a manuscript or for a review, what's been already done. So some of these approaches is to begin by identifying a broad problem area and indicate why it is important, often by using statistics about how prevalent the problem is in a population of interest. So in other words, you lay the groundwork to say, hey, here's what's out there, here's how prevalent the problem is, and here's why we're going to be talking about it, because it's such a significant problem. Another approach is to begin with a conceptual definition of key variables of interest, so followed by statements and statistics indicating the importance of the problem area. So again, you talk about various definitions of key interest, and then you start to provide some data, some statistics to support those claims in order to substantiate and reinforce why the importance of doing this study is. With either approach, though, it's important to provide conceptual definitions of important variables in the introductory paragraph. So in the introduction, you'll see particular definitions that might be germane to the review of literature. And a subheading of definition of key terms is often used in literature review of a thesis proposal, and that provides a section to identify key terms that will be used throughout the proposal. So let's look at two different examples of writing a literature review. On the left is when you're looking at the first approach is using the dependent variable obesity in this case, and using some statistics to talk about in clergymen the amount of obesity suffered in clergy. So this approach here, we're talking about obesity in clergy, talking about why that might be the case. Over here, you start with a definition, the independent variable, in this case, chronic stress. So then you start to lay out some of the approach or some of the definitions and some of the what chronic stress is, and then you later on link it to obesity. So there's two different approaches here. Again, talking about the dependent variable and the link to obesity in clergy. Here you're talking about the independent variable in terms of the chronic stress due to obesity. So either one is an effective approach in terms of laying the groundwork for writing a literature review. However, but either way, you want to make sure you define the broad problem and provide key terms and some statistics to support your reason for the literature review. Okay? So either approach, just make sure that you define the broad problem, provide some statistics to substantiate your the problem that you are going to be discussing. So after you've established the broad problem and the importance of the problem area and defining key terms, the next step is to write a topic-by-topic description of relevant research to the overall problem. In a thesis proposal, the proposal you'll be doing this is done using major and minor subheadings as seen here. So the major subheading is physical activity, and the subheadings would be as you see here. So the idea is that you have a broad topic, in this case physical activity, and you start to refine particular areas under physical activity, such as physical activity participation in the U.S., influences of physical activity participation, that factors may influence them, and then the health benefits of physical activity participation. The idea, though, is you start broad and then you work your way to more of a narrow topic using these subheadings. So the literature review for a research article is much more concise and not nearly as exhaustive as that in a thesis or dissertation. So for example, a research article, you might only have, the literature review might be 3 to 5 paragraphs in length, whereas in a thesis or dissertation, it could be anywhere from 5 to 20 or even more pages long to give a much more in-depth review of literature. But in a research article, they are simply not the space to go into that much detail. So it's important to be very concise in terms of your research literature review for a publication. And it's also important that in your literature review that only the most relevant and recent research articles, except for those older seminal papers, foundational papers, are cited in the introduction of the research article. But the purpose is still the same: to identify the research problem, establish its importance, define key terms, and review important research to demonstrate the need for further research on the topic. So again, you're just giving the reader an idea as to why this study was important, what's been done, but what hasn't been done. And you need to be clear and concise of that when you're doing a research article. Or if you're doing a thesis or a proposal, it'll be much more in depth. But again, either way, you're going to describe include these different areas in your article or your proposal. So here are some tips in terms of writing a literature review that could be helpful when you're doing your proposal. So again, whether you're writing a literature review for a research article, thesis, dissertation, or brief grant proposal, or again, your proposal, you make sure you avoid writing a series of abstracts. In other words, taking all the different, you may have 20 different articles that you find of use, and you're simply writing a summary of one article, Article 1, then you write a summary of Article 2, then write a summary of Article 3. That can be too exhaustive, and that also doesn't provide any summary or any type of idea in a easy to understand fashion. Instead, you should group like references together when they support a general conclusion or have something else in common. So instead of having, you may have through those 20 articles, you may have 3 different themes. And so you would take the theme 1 and you would summarize those using those 7 different articles. But again, you would actually try to weave those 7 articles together, explaining that theme. But again, you wouldn't go to exhaustive one abstract summary after the article summary after an article summary. Also, do not assume the results of each study are facts that have been proven. They have merely been supported by one study. So avoid using the word prove something and instead use the word has been supported. It's very difficult to prove something from one particular study. Also, identify and understand that all studies are not equal in quality. So some have stronger methodology than others. So be selective when appropriate in terms of putting those into your manuscript or your project or a review of literature for a dissertation or a thesis. So it's okay to have identify there might be various tiers in terms of the quality of research based on the methodology used. And those methodology used could be potentially cause a gap in the literature in terms of what may or may not be effective in terms of doing the finding out the results. So when you're looking at the literature, again, you want to identify in your proposal those gaps and explicitly state those in the review, generally speaking. So again, those could be after each summary paragraph, and you can then summarize it at the end. The idea is you want to leave the review of literature with an idea of here's what we know, and then here's what we don't know, and this is why this research proposal is important. So this concludes the overview of writing a literature review. Make sure that you review this, look over it several times, practice looking through NIH, the PubMed, or other sources to find the articles of interest. And then once you have that, it'll be important for you to start to review those articles and start to develop some themes that you can then start to write in your proposal. So again, you look over this and be prepared to prior to taking the exam.